As a Christian, what are you supposed to do about claims by scientists that evolution is true? Well, you can investigate those claims for yourself, and you may conclude, like I did, that God uses evolution to create life on this planet. Today, we'll take a look at evidence from how plants and animals are distributed throughout the globe, and also look at a couple of fun mysteries. Hey there, I'm John and welcome to my channel. We discuss interesting and challenging aspects of Christianity here. Evolution is an important topic for us. So, biogeography is simply the branch of biology that deals with the geographical distribution of plants and animals. Biogeography is a good test of evolution. If God created by evolution, we would expect to see animals appear in certain areas of the world based upon where their ancestors appeared. If God created directly, we should expect that, while of course animals and plants will be in climates that suit them, otherwise we would expect no rhyme or reason, nothing consistent with evolution, to their dispersal patterns. Closely related species may appear in completely different corners of the world. And we do in fact see that the dispersion of animals and plants throughout the world is in alignment with what we would expect from evolutionary theory. I'm going to lay out 4 aspects of biogeography that support evolution: islands, Rend species, the fossil record, and what I call the penguin versus polar bear phenomenon. Then I'll mention a couple of current mysteries, anomalies that may be used by direct creationists to argue against evolution. Okay, islands. I think islands are the most convincing evidence within biogeography for evolution. To start with, we find that an overwhelming number and proportion of endemic species are on islands. In other words, on a particular island, we find plants and animals that occur nowhere else in the world. For example, on some of the smaller islands of the Galapagos island system, 100% of the plant species are endemic to the Galapagos island system. The evolutionary argument for this is straightforward. Life arrived on the island, say a seed blown by the wind, and then evolution took over, resulting in a species that is unique to that island. The direct creationist response would, I imagine, go something like this. God directly created some plants and creatures and placed them on an island and nowhere else. They couldn't leave, and so you only find them on that island. Well, that's possible, but the evolutionary argument to me is a lot cleaner. The bigger evidence, however, is not what is on islands, but what isn't. It's not what is present, but what is missing, especially on islands that arose out of the ocean, as opposed to those that split off from a continent. As Jerry Coyne, along with many others, notes, over and over again, on the oceanic islands that dot the Pacific, the South Atlantic, and the Indian Ocean, one sees a pattern of missing groups. More to the point, the same missing groups. Simply put, we generally don't find freshwater fish, reptiles, and land mammals on oceanic islands unless they were brought there by humans. You don't find native horses in Hawaii. The evolutionary explanation is straightforward and clear. Land mammals had no way to get to the island, so there aren't any there. The ocean islands started empty, and what is there is what could find its way there. The direct creationist argument would be, well, the plants and animals that God decided to place on oceanic islands just happened to all be ones that could also have traveled there. Or they could say that God left oceanic islands empty for some reason, and what is there is what got there. But then you run into the problem that what is there, the species that are there, are often endemic to the island, and so you have to admit that evolution happened. I don't see a way out for the direct creationists, except to accept evolution in a limited sense, but not in a grand sense, which doesn't make sense to me. So that is oceanic islands. What about continental islands? That is, islands that broke off from a mainland and are reasonably close to the mainland. Here you do sometimes find animals that can swim, and creatures that may have been there since before the island split off from the mainland. But what you often get in general is animals and plants that are unique, but most similar to animals and plants on the nearest mainland. Why would this pattern hold? The evolutionary argument is that the, say, animals got there from the mainland and then some evolution happened. The direct creationist argument is, well, I can't think of a good response to this. Okay, so that's islands. The second phenomenon to discuss here is Rend species. Sometimes, in a population of a species, a group breaks off and moves into a neighboring space, a neighboring geography. They are not separate species, as they can still breed with the original population. This can happen several times over, for example, along the edge of a natural border. Let's say it happens around a volcano. By the time the new groups stretch all the way around and get back to the starting point, or by the time two such sets of new groups meet at the far end of the barrier, there are two distinct species which cannot interbreed. One good example of this is salamanders in California. There's a barrier running north to south down the state. Along the east side, salamanders adapt in different ways than those on the west side of the barrier, due at least partly to different geography. By the time we get to the southern end of the boundary, there are two distinct species which cannot interbreed. What does this show? The evolutionary argument is that this shows that a chain of small variations within a species can eventually lead to two separate species. The direct creation argument is that, well, I suppose it would be that God allowed for variations along the chain and then directly created the new species at the end point, and it just looks like evolution happened. Or else, some direct creationists admit that God creates by evolution when small changes are involved, like between salamanders, but not when bigger changes are involved. Like, evolution is true to a point, but for some reason God does not allow it to proceed too far and steps in and directly creates the big differences we see between different classes of animals. Now, the third phenomenon I'd like to highlight is that living animals often live in the same geographic area as their extinct fossil ancestors. From a direct creation standpoint, there's no reason for this to be the case, unless the environment is super unique, which generally is not so. But it fits perfectly with an evolutionary explanation. And South America is a great example. As Kenneth Miller relates, South America had proven to contain a fauna that was strikingly unique, boasting animals found nowhere else on Earth. To drive the point home, South America also contained a fossil record packed with those animals' closest anatomical relatives. Why, one might ask, would such a unique set of animals be found in exactly the same place as their closest fossil relatives? There could be just one answer: a process of descent with modification linked the present to the past. Now, the fourth and last line of evidence I'd like to discuss is what I call the penguin versus polar bear effect. Polar bears are at the North Pole and penguins at the South Pole. Why? So one thing to note is that there are different climate zones in the world. There's Arctic tundra and desert and rainforest and others. Sometimes, say, a forest in one part of the world has the same animals and plants as a forest in another part of the world. Sometimes the plants and animals are different. Now, another thing to note is that tectonic plates have been moving over the course of the Earth's history, and continents that are now separated were once joined. And it turns out, generally, that when animals and plants are the same, in the same climates but in different areas of the world, it is the case that those areas used to be joined, and the life form existed in the joined continent. When a particular, say, desert has different life forms than another desert, it is generally the case that those land masses were never joined, or were last joined before the animal or plant at issue came to exist. Aaron Yilmaz points out a few of these circumstances in his book, Deliver Us from Evolution. Polar bears are in the Arctic but not in Antarctica, and penguins vice versa. Also cacti, like cactus plants, are in the US but not in other deserts in the world, even though they would thrive in other deserts. One other example that I have found is that half of the trees and shrubs in eastern North America can trace their relatives to eastern Asia. This is because long ago there was a forested land bridge across the northern Pacific and a continuous climate zone from China to the southeastern US. So the evolutionary explanation is that shifting continents play a large role in the present-day distribution of plants and animals. The direct creation argument is, I suppose, that God simply chose to separate penguins and polar bears, and that he put trees and animals in places that just makes it look like biogeography supports evolution. So these are four clear and convincing arguments from biogeography in support of evolution. But there are still mysteries in the realm of biogeography, and there are some circumstances that look odd in light of evolution and could be used as arguments against evolution. Let's end by taking a look at two of them. One current mystery is South American primates. We're not sure how they got there. The order of events is Africa and South America split apart about 100 million years ago. Then monkeys appear in Africa, and then they appear in South America. They appear in South America at least 27 million years ago, based upon the fossil record, and maybe up to 50 million years ago, based upon the molecular evidence. Could they have migrated north through Europe, and then south down through North America? Well, there was no land bridge between North and South America in those days, and we have no fossil evidence in North America to support that hypothesis, so probably not. Could monkeys have traveled to South America via Antarctica? Well, Antarctica was covered by ice sheets at the time and was not strongly connected to South America, so that is unlikely too. Well, if they didn't go around the ocean, maybe they went on the ocean. It sounds crazy, but it's actually plausible. Every flood season, trees are swept into rivers and carried out to sea, and vegetative islands are known to have been transported by currents from Africa to the coast of Brazil. If Miocene-era rafts possess trees, and we have seen such rafts with tree mass in modern times, then they could have acted as sails. According to Elaine Houle, a Canadian primatologist, floating islands could have crossed the Atlantic in 2 weeks, given the wind and currents that existed 30 million years ago. And that 2 weeks could reduce to 10 days with favorable but reasonable conditions. Could small mammals survive for 10 days or more without water? Yes, they could. It sounds far-fetched, but we do have examples of rafts carrying iguanas through the Caribbean during a recent hurricane. Now, the second anomaly I'd like to mention is freshwater crabs. Freshwater crabs aren't known to migrate, so how did they spread to a number of continents? The easiest proposed solution is that crabs were present in Gondwanaland, a large continent a long time ago, and then as Gondwanaland broke up into many of the present-day continents, the crabs spread out. But no, the earliest fossil evidence of crabs is from later than that. And other evidence too, including molecular methods, points to that not being the case. Maybe after Gondwanaland had broken apart, but before the continents had separated too far, saltwater crabs infiltrated brackish waters and then rivers, independently progressing into freshwater crabs in multiple places through an evolutionary process, so that's possible. There is also a good hypothesis that crabs traveled from East Africa to Southeast Asia, taking advantage of land bridges that appeared when ocean levels were a lot lower than today, stopping in India along the way. This hypothesis comports with biogeographic and phylogenetic data, so it is also possible, but we don't really know for sure. Well, that's it for today. If you obtained value from this video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. Until next time, God bless.